Hey there, it is Faith Talk Live. I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
And I'm Ezra Ortiz.
Yeah, and Rick is out today, but we are so blessed to be joined by another beard. I mean,
That's right.
it's probably even better than Rick's beard. Rush, if you could meet Rick, his beard is gray, but it's not quite as big as yours.
Okay.
So we got a
I hope I
battle of
get
the
to see
beards
that
going
beard
on here
sometime.
with Ezra and Rush, and I'm nowhere near it. So
You're a neutral third party.
I am, yes. We're talking to Rush Witt. He's a pastor, he's an author, he's a counselor, and I mean, you name it, he does it basically. You probably do, construction and all kinds of other stuff too, right, Rush?
A few other things, but no construction.
No construction. Okay, all right. Well, I mean, you have a nice looking. It looks like the basement may be there behind you.
Yeah, virtual background actually.
Oh, so, virtual background. Okay, I was going to say because you need
similar to your outdoor background.
It almost fooled me. I will say, I was like, man, that's a very nice, clean background.
Yeah, I like that. I was just going to say you need some furniture back there, but other than that, it looks
great. And my basement does not look anything like that.
No.
Yeah, so
a little messier than that, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, you have several kids, so you're allowed to have that. And real quick, before we officially get started, I just want everybody to know that Rush Witt is running for president in 2024, and if he is elected, he's going to put all the financial resources of the country into the scientific minds to where the development of a vacuum cleaner that doesn't fall over onto your back when you squat down to hose up the crumbs under the couch. That got my vote right there.
There you go. Yeah, you've been on Twitter.
Yeah, and it sounds like that came from maybe some personal experience. What happened there?
Well, personal experience. Every time you vacuum, I think everybody has that experience. If you try to vacuum and falls over and hits you on the head, it's a big problem. It needs to be solved.
That's why I say just don't lean over and vacuum under the couch and just leave all the stuff there. You never know what will grow there. Anyway, we're going to talk to Rush about his new book, which is out. It's called I Want to Escape. And this sounds like a very interesting book. And you're a counselor. And folks, when they start to face adversity in life or hard times, a lot of times we just want to get away from it all. And that's what you want to talk about. So let's start there. What made you want to write about folks that just want to escape?
Well, as you mentioned, I'm a pastor and biblical counselor. And those things together put me in contact with people in our church and in our community who are struggling in lots of different ways. And actually, those experiences, like they do for many of us, put us in touch with ourselves. And so as I was thinking about the different conversations I was having and trying to help others in my church, and then thinking about my own heart and life, especially during the pandemic, it became very clear to me that this was something that I really needed. I needed help dealing with this natural instinct to escape when hard things happen. And actually, the pandemic was strangely a great time to think through that, because there were lots of things in me. There were lots of reasons in life and ministry to encourage that feeling of, I want to get out of here. I want to escape this situation. I want some relief. I want to get out of the conflicts and all of the pressures and questions. And so it was a good time to think through that and try to put together some short resource that could help us, and really so many of us, because I think this is a widespread issue that I'll be surprised if there's anyone in the world who doesn't struggle with the just first response of, I got to get out of here. I've got to get out of this hard thing.
Yeah. And I think just thinking about when people hear that term escapism, right? They might think, well, I'm not physically, literally escaping. I'm not literally running out the back door. So maybe,
or maybe they are. Who knows?
Maybe they are. They could be. You know what I mean?
Right.
But what I mean, maybe what does kind of the more subtle forms of escapism look like?
Yeah, that's a great question, because, I think that it's important for us to be able to understand the problem if we're going to do something about it. And this can be a hard problem to understand or get our minds around, because, to use your word, it is so subtle. In Proverbs 4:23, we read that we are to guard our hearts with all diligence, for out of them flow the issues of life. And that's been a very defining verse for me in my Christian life, because it has reframed where the issues of the real important issues of my life come from, that they're not, as I have often thought of them, outside of me, and all of the problems are out there, and I need to guard my heart as though I'm defending my heart against the world, but rather that I need to be focused on what's coming out of my heart. And so I think that these subtle escapist routes ultimately start there. They start in places of worship, in our affections, or could be loss of hope. It could be our ruling desires or some belief that's taken root that really is disordered. It's not really true. It's leading me into a view of God that sees him as less than he is, weaker than he is, less loving and caring for me than he is. And so then those instincts start to rise up, and I start to look for other ways to deal with these hard things in life. So I think there are thousands of ways that we could go about this escaping, that we could manufacture ways to escape. So actually in the book, I found it more helpful than trying to give an inventory of all of them, kind of organize them around maybe 4 categories, which are denial, distraction, deflecting and destroying, and then also the most ultimate escape, which have enormous compassion for times when we're struggling with thoughts of suicide and wanting to escape by death as the final category. So having those categories, I think, is helpful to answer that question, Ezra, that you're asking, which is, how do we make sense of this or find it in our lives to be able to categorize these issues and then deal with them?
We're talking to Rush Witt, author, pastor, counselor, again, you name it, and his new book called I Want to Escape, Reaching for Hope When Life is Too Much. Now, Rush, you mentioned the 4 different categories you kind of put it into, but for those who may not even know they're going into escapism, what do we look for? How do we go, wait a minute, I think I'm kind of trying to escape from all this?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that certainly can be challenging. I think one of the reasons why getting a grip on this problem is so difficult is because it gives us a kind of relief, so that we're not really looking at it as a problem. Most of the time when I feel these temptations to escape, I am feeling a temptation to something that I think is the answer. So I'm not really geared to think about it as a problem. In fact, I think about it as the solution. But the more that we can, through God's help in his word, to understand our own hearts, I think it's really the key to seeing where this is inside of us. There's a helpful sort of 3-part plan that has been useful in my life. It's been useful in counseling, but in particular, a kind of self-counseling, which really goes by just 3 words: enter, understand, bring. I talk about this. I'm actually in another book called Die Hard Sins, as a way that we can identify these things, to enter our own struggle with sin, and to do that with joy because of what Jesus has done for us and the power of the gospel to change us, to understand our own need, what's going on in those areas of our hearts, and then to bring Christ and his answers to bear upon those issues, those temptations to escape. So we really do need to have God's insight into our hearts to identify this problem in these categories, and not to see it always as a solution. Though certainly there are situations, and I do talk about this in the book briefly, there are situations where escape is the right response in times of danger or physical abuse or hardships like that. Absolutely, we need to get distance from those so that we can take these other steps. But by and large, that heart level escapism is something that we need God's help to identify and see in ourselves, for sure.
Yeah. And I think so we've been talking a little bit about what is escapism, what does it look like, all of these things. Now, what on the flip side of that, what does it look like for someone to depend on Jesus, right? To really lean in and say, instead of backing away, I'm actually choosing to take that step forward. What does that look like for, how would you counsel someone through those questions, that feeling?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, especially in light of what this book and some others that are in the same series. This series of books is called Ask the Christian Counselor, and they're not books that are really just for Christian or biblical counselors to use, but for anyone who's facing one of these topics or issues to be able to say, I could read this book and hear what a biblical counselor would tell me. And of course, it can be used in counseling. And so in order for us to deal with this problem, I think that we need some practical plan. I always benefit from having something that I can get my mind and heart around, because problems like this for me seem so unmovable. It seems confusing because often I'm in a place of I'm starting to lose hope about a situation. So I need something I can really hang on to. So there are a number of different ways that we could talk about dealing with escape. I do it in another kind of 3-step or 3-focus approach, which is to pray with humility first. We ultimately need our hearts to be humbled so that we'll turn to the Lord. The whole point of this topic of escape or this response is we're kind of turning another way. We're trying to find another out, another way to find relief or comfort rather than looking to the God of comfort. So that's where we need to start, is we need to engage with God by faith in Jesus because of the good news. And we do that by praying with humility. And then from there, we're able to think about the ultimate beliefs that have been given to us, the promises that Christ has made to us, so that we can believe with renewed, what I call gospel hope. We need to believe the big, bright truths and promises that the Lord has given to us in Christ by faith in him. And then, of course, there is no real change without action. And so we do need to act. And Ezra's keying in on what is the central act that we're moving toward in dealing with these escapist temptations, is we really need to act with a kind of courageous dependence on God. We need to learn to depend upon him. My escapism is leading me to become independent of him rather than dependent on him. And of course, that's the Christian life, growing more dependent upon him every day.
Great stuff. It's Rush Witt. The book is I Want to Escape, Reaching for Hope When Life is Too Much. You can find it at newgrowthpress.com. You can also follow Rush. Rush, you've got your own website, right? What's your website?
It's mynameisrush.com. So
mynameisrush.com. Simple enough. And you can find the books there. You can find some audio of, I'm assuming, some of your sermons and other stuff. Do you do a podcast, Rush?
I don't have a podcast. Just the sermon audio is there, and some other things to read. I write there from time to time. So,
and wherever you go, find a picture of him, because his beard is beautiful.
Yes,
phenomenal.
And when you do make that podcast, then you can it'll be the picture of your beard.
That's right.
That's all you need, is just the beard.
There you go.
That's great. Rush, thanks so much for joining us. We'd love to talk to you again and dive into more about why you got into counseling and talk a little more about some of your other books. That'd be great.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.
All right. It's Rush Witt. Again, newgrowthpress.com. You can find out more information. You are listening to Faith Talk Live. I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
And I'm Ezra Ortiz.
And we'll be back. Stay with us.